Metro Dispatch, this is Kelly. What's going on?
I went to try to secure a vehicle, and debtor came out of the house and pulled a gun on me.
Who's the debtor that pulled the gun?
Vehicle's name is under Steven Perkins.
Decatur police officers enter Steven Perkins' neighborhood walking toward his house. Eventually, the video shows the small group stop next to Perkins' home. It appears that as the tow truck driver hitches Perkins' pickup truck, Perkins walks outside.
Hey, what's that?
Marquette says he and his officers took various positions around Perkins' home, and when the driver began repossession of the vehicle, Perkins came out of the home with his arm extended and a gun in plain view. Marquette says he saw Perkins, quote, advance toward the tow truck driver and point the gun at the driver. Marquette says he reacted to what he saw as a threat by yelling and identifying himself as police, commanding Perkins to drop his weapon.
Police originally said the officer told Perkins to drop the weapon and that Perkins refused to do so. Now, Chief Pinion says that's not what happened.
18 bullets were fired in just seconds. It was after midnight in a quiet neighborhood on Ryan Drive, Decatur, Alabama. A man stood in his own driveway, armed, facing what he thought was an attempted theft. Within moments, he was lying on the ground, bleeding, unmoving. Police officers surrounded him, but no one had knocked on his door. No sirens, no announcements, no warning. His name was Steven Perkins, a husband, a father, a man who would never go back inside his home again. By morning, the headlines were already writing the story. But as the hours turned into days, and as court documents began to surface, the narrative started to fracture. The officer who pulled the trigger wasn't on a standard call. There was no warrant, no arrest order, just a plan, made in the shadows, to return to a house under the cover of night. It wasn't until months later that a judge said it plainly. The officer who fired wasn't acting under legal authority. He wasn't even supposed to be there. So why was he? This is more than just a case of a fatal shooting. It's a timeline of decisions, each one leading closer to the moment a man's life was taken in his front yard. It's a question of power, of policy, and of whether the system meant to protect the public ever really protected Steven Perkins. And perhaps most disturbingly of all, it's a story that might not have ever come to light, if not for one camera, mounted quietly on a neighbor's front porch. Welcome to another episode of True Crime Mystery Vault. If you're ready to explore the full story, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Because this is just the beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss a second of what comes next. Steven Perkins lived a quiet life in Decatur, Alabama. A 39-year-old father, a husband, someone who, by all accounts, worked hard, minded his business, and cared deeply for his family. His home sat along Ryan Drive, 3931 to be exact, a modest neighborhood. The kind of place where streetlights glow just enough to see the mailboxes and where late-night noise is rare. That night, the night everything changed, it was just past 12:30 a.m. September 29th, 2023. Inside the house, Steven was where most would be at that hour, home. Inside, at peace. Outside, things were moving. A tow truck driver named Caleb Combs, working for All-Star Recovery, had a job to do. He said he was acting on a repossession order. The target? A pickup truck parked in Steven's driveway. The creditor? Pentagon Federal Credit Union, the same lender Steven had used to finance the vehicle. But here's where the story begins to splinter. Steven's family insisted the loan was current.
His attorneys and family members just want to know what happened that September 29th night.
They ambushed my brother and then took his truck, at least allowed his truck to leave. It was an active crime scene. I don't get it.
Now, after the shooting, Steve Perkins' family says that Perkins was not behind on his payments. There was really no reason for that repo driver to even be at the house. They now feel vindicated now that they have this truck back in custody.
They claimed there had been no late payments, no warnings, no calls, no repossession notices. To them, this was a mistake, and not just a financial one, a fatal one. That's what his family still can't let go of. To this day, they believe the tow truck should have never been there to begin with. That night wasn't supposed to happen. They've stood by it from the beginning. Steven wasn't late. He wasn't hiding anything. He wasn't running. And yet, the truck was marked. The engine was cold. And Caleb Combs had every intention of towing it away in the middle of the night. That kind of timing wasn't random. Late-night repossessions are common. They're meant to avoid confrontation. You go in while people are asleep, hook the truck, and get out before the owner notices. But this time, someone was awake. Steven Perkins saw the tow truck. He stepped outside to confront the driver. And he wasn't empty-handed. What happened next didn't involve any shouting, no fighting, no struggle. But it did involve a firearm. According to the driver, Steven was holding a gun. Not pointed, not fired, but visible. And with that, the driver did what many would do. He left. Caleb Combs didn't waste time. After leaving 3931 Ryan Drive, he didn't go home. He went back to his shop, likely shaken, maybe frustrated. But more importantly, he picked up the phone. On the other end of the line was Morgan County Dispatch.
Central Dispatch, this is Kelly.
Hey, Kelly, this is Caleb with All-Star Recovery.
Hey.
I was wondering if you could get an officer out here to our lot.
What's the address?
3920 Full Valley Road.
Okay, what was your name again?
Caleb.
And what's your phone number there?
My personal is 256.
Okay, what's going on?
Went to try to secure a vehicle, and debtor came out of the house and pulled a gun on me.
Where did that happen?
3931 Ryan Drive.
Okay, did they fire off a shot or anything?
No, it just I called Jack earlier, and he said that pushes the borders of civil and criminal.
Who's the debtor that pulled the gun?
The vehicle's name is under Steven Perkins, but I don't know who the gentleman was that come out on me.
Okay. Do you know
I'm assuming it was him.
Okay. Did you get a look at him? What he looked like?
Yeah, he bald, like a milk chocolate color, black man.
Okay. Did you see what he was wearing?
He come out in basketball shorts and like a white T-shirt.
Did you see what kind of gun it was?
I did not. It was dark.
Okay. Was it a handgun or a long gun?
Yeah.
It's a handgun.
Handgun.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll get somebody down to y'all shop on Pool Valley to meet with you.
All right. Thank
All
you, ma'am.
Thanks.
The call was logged, and a response was dispatched.
Bravo 59 and clear.
10-4. I have a meat complaint I'm holding for you.
10-4, go ahead.
It's going to be 3920 Pool Valley Road Southwest. Callers requesting to meet at All-Star Recovery reference. He was trying to get a vehicle on Ryan Drive, and the male stepped out and pulled a gun on him. And you can see your notes there further. 3920 Pool Valley Road Southwest. 10-4.
According to court records and the civil lawsuit later filed by Steven's family, this wasn't a routine follow-up. It became a planning session. Officers Mac Marquette, Williams, MacMed, and Summers, along with Caleb Combs and another man, Richie Brady, met together and formed a strategy. What they came up with wasn't standard. Just before 2 a.m., the Decatur police officers returned to 3931 Ryan Drive. They didn't prepare a warrant. They didn't go to the home to knock on the door and investigate a complaint. They decided to return to Steven's house. But this time, they wouldn't pull up with lights. They wouldn't knock, and they wouldn't make their presence known.
Police officers enter Steven Perkins' neighborhood walking toward his house. We've sped up the walking for time purposes. It takes them about 90 seconds to reach the side of Perkins' home. Zooming out, we can see the full layout of the neighborhood. Eventually, the video shows the small group stop next to Perkins' home. A couple of the individuals walk down the next-door neighbor's driveway, one crossing the street, the other returning to the side of Perkins' house.
And with a plan they never documented in any official report, they let the tow truck driver start the repossession again, this time with backup waiting in the shadows. They weren't responding to an emergency. They were preparing for something else. From the outside, it might have looked like a SWAT exercise, Only this wasn't a drug raid. It wasn't a barricade situation. It was a truck repossession. One man, one driveway, and 4 officers surrounded a home under the cover of darkness. For 12 minutes, they adjusted their positions. None of them approached the front door. None of them announced themselves. No officer knocked, no lights, no sirens. This wasn't response. It was preparation. Inside the home, Steven Perkins was still awake, and when he looked out the window, he saw the tow truck again. What he didn't see, what he couldn't have seen, were the officers hiding in the dark, watching, waiting. Just like before, Steven stepped outside. In his hand was a firearm with a flashlight attachment, something legal to own, something many homeowners carry when confronting unknown movement in the night. From his view, there was a tow truck driver in his driveway. Again. "Put the truck down," he said, according to the audio. And then it happened. Fast. 7 seconds. That's all it took. Officer Marquette emerged from his hidden position and shouted, "Hey, police, get on the ground." Before Steven could respond, before he could lower his weapon, speak, or retreat, Marquette fired. 18 rounds.
595, stand 3, you got one coming to the door.
In a matter of seconds, 7 bullets hit Steven Perkins. He collapsed where he stood, bleeding out in his own yard. Other officers emerged from their hidden spots, rushing in to place him under arrest, even as he lay critically wounded. Body cam footage would later show that CPR and basic first aid were performed. Paramedics were called. When paramedics arrived, the scene was still fresh. Steven Perkins was on the ground. The crime scene was active, or at least treated like one. Steven had been hit 7 times, multiple rounds to the torso. At that point, nothing mattered more than keeping him alive long enough to reach a surgical table. Life-saving measures begin immediately. Despite every effort, the injuries were too severe. Steven Perkins died at the hospital. 1 encounter. 7 seconds, 18 shots. And a man who moments earlier had simply looked out his window was now gone. Do you think the officers were justified? Or did Steven Perkins die without cause? Comment your thoughts below. I want to hear from you. And if you're new here, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime stories like this. In the hours following Steven Perkins' death, the questions began. But it wasn't just about why shots were fired. It was about whether the police should have even been there in the first place. Under Alabama law, repossession companies are allowed to recover property, but with restrictions. If a repossession is expected to cause a disturbance, or if the recovery becomes confrontational, there's a critical line that can't be crossed without a court order. In short, police cannot be involved in helping a repo agent without judicial authorization. Not as backup, not as intimidation, not as force. That night, there was no court order, no warrant, nothing that legally sanctioned Decatur police officers to return to Steven's home and support a second repossession attempt. And that's exactly what they did. According to testimony and court documents, the officers said they were there to keep the peace or to investigate the firearm complaint. But their actions, parking out of view, sneaking into position, hiding behind homes, didn't match standard peacekeeping protocol. If this were truly an investigation or a welfare check, the approach would have been simple. Lights on, knock at the front door, introduce themselves, ask questions. That single choice, to stay hidden, set everything else in motion. The court later addressed it directly. In March 2025, Judge Charles Elliott reviewed the events of that night and issued a pointed ruling. He stated that Officer Mac Marquette had acted outside the scope of his official authority. According to the judge, Marquette was not lawfully present on the property. His presence was not backed by any legal directive. He wasn't serving a warrant. He wasn't responding to an emergency. And he had no court order authorizing his support in the repossession. The judge called it plainly. Marquette was a trespasser, That word, trespasser, redefined the entire case. It meant that the officer who shot Steven Perkins wasn't protected by official immunity. He wasn't on duty in the way that mattered most, legally. And that single word opened the door for murder charges. In the aftermath of Steven Perkins' death, the Decatur Police Department tried to control the narrative. The police chief, Todd Pinion, was the first to speak out publicly. But what he said only added fuel to an already raging fire.
Decatur's police chief says his department erred in what it said happened the morning Steven Perkins was shot and killed by an officer.
Chief Todd Pinion says in a statement released tonight that in their initial rush to release information to the public on the morning of September 29th, they gave inaccurate information about the interaction between Perkins and the officer. Police originally said the officer told Perkins to drop the weapon and that Perkins refused to do so. Now, Chief Pinion says that's not what happened.
Then this evening, Chief Pinion confirmed in his statement what we reported earlier, that the officer identified himself and told Perkins to get on the ground before the officer fired. The chief went on to apologize for the inaccurate description of the encounter in their first statement.
In an attempt to correct the record, the chief issued an apology to the public. He admitted to the error, but for many the damage was already done. The police had lied, and now the public was questioning everything. Why had they lied? And why had it taken so long for the truth to come out? As the weeks passed, protests erupted across Decatur. What started as a public outcry over a man's death soon turned into a clash between citizens and law enforcement. The police chief apologized, but the community still felt betrayed. But it wasn't just the public making waves. The very people who should have been fighting for justice, Steven's family, became the target of police aggression. The widow, Catrella Perkins, was arrested during one of the protests.
What started as a normal night of protest for the shooting death of Steve Perkins quickly turned chaotic in downtown Decatur. 3 people have been arrested during this afternoon's demonstrations. Even one of Steve Perkins' close family members was detained.
I arrived in downtown Decatur tonight just to check up on the protests, and when I did, I saw Steve Perkins' widow, Catrella Perkins, in handcuffs, surrounded by Decatur police officers. Now, she was later released from their custody, but 3 other protesters are facing charges tonight after tonight's arrest. Now, this is viewer video of Catrella Perkins being detained by Decatur police. I've been told by protesters Derek Taylor was also arrested tonight. He's the husband of Sierra Taylor, who was arrested and beaten by Decatur police last month for protesting outside of the home of Mayor Tab Bowling. Witnesses say officers approached Derek and requested he remove the mask he was wearing. Despite Derek complying and removing the mask, he was handcuffed and put in a patrol car. 2 other Perkins protesters, I'm told, are being booked right now as well.
We'll have a good evening. I'm going to arrest you first and foremost because you seem to be the main instigator.
There was not one officer that de-escalate anything, all right? See, that lets you know that they hadn't been properly trained. They definitely have not been properly trained. And those guys like Renshaw, they in this personal. They got personal vendettas. They're mad, they're angry, they're bitter, and they're taking out on the citizens.
As tensions escalated in the streets, another major revelation came to light. An independent review of the Decatur Police Department uncovered disturbing findings. The officers involved in the protests were not merely following orders. They were actively antagonizing the demonstrators, pushing for confrontations and seeking arrests. It wasn't just about keeping the peace. It was about making a statement. The review highlighted a pattern of unprofessional conduct, and it painted a damning picture of how the department handled protests.
19 people filed complaints against an officer following a demonstration last week. This is according to Morgan County NAACP President Rodney Gordon. The reported complaints follow what members of groups supporting Catrella Perkins, Steve Perkins' widow, say were met with, quote, harassment and unprofessionalism by Lieutenant Joe Renshaw during the 3rd Friday Street Festival.
But this wasn't a simple case of seeking justice. The first legal battle was a blow to the Perkins family's pursuit of justice. Federal claims were dismissed.
Alabama law enforcement agency says it will not release body camera video related to the shooting death of Steven Perkins. Aaliyah's denial follows a request for the videos from a Perkins family attorney. Aaliyah issued the denial letter today. Alabama law allows them to choose not to disclose the recording if that disclosure would affect an ongoing law enforcement investigation or prosecution.
The dismissal felt like a setback, a legal hurdle that seemed to push the family's quest for justice further out of reach. Yet they didn't stop. They appealed the ruling and pressed forward. As the investigation moved forward, attention shifted to the man who pulled the trigger, Officer Mac Marquette. A relatively new officer with the Decatur Police Department, Marquette had been hired in the fall of 2020. But what many didn't know was that when he was hired, he wasn't even certified as a police officer. It wasn't until April 2021 that Marquette officially received his certification, clearing him to work on the streets of Decatur. And for just a year and a half, Marquette served on the force. He was known to his colleagues as a drone expert, a skill that earned him an award just 1 week before the shooting. But his actions on the night of September 29, 2023, would overshadow any recognition he'd received up until that point. Marquette's defense was swift. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Marquette filed for immunity, claiming that the shooting was an act of self-defense. His argument was simple. Steven Perkins posed a threat when he came out of his house armed. In his view, the officer's decision to fire was justified, even though the situation had escalated in a way that many believed could have been avoided. But the court didn't agree.
In March, the judge rejected Marquette's claims that he acted in self-defense. His appeal of that ruling is now before the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals.
Judge Charles Elliott ruled that Marquette's actions were outside the scope of his authority, stating that he had no legal grounds to be on Steven Perkins's property in the first place. The judge went even further, calling Marquette a trespasser on Steven's land. Yet Marquette wasn't willing to accept that judgment. He appealed the decision, asking the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals to overturn Judge Elliott's ruling.
Into our newsroom from Morgan County, Mac Marquette, the former Decatur police officer charged with murder in the death of Steven Perkins, is appealing his request for immunity from the charges and asking the court to delay his trial, currently set for June the 9th. In March, the judge rejected Marquette's claims that he acted in self-defense. His appeal of that ruling is now before the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals.
His legal team argued that even though Marquette wasn't authorized to be there, his use of deadly force was still justified because he believed his life was in danger. The case now hinged on a question that would define the outcome. Was Marquette's life truly at risk? Or was this an instance of an officer acting outside his legal boundaries, without cause, without justification, and ultimately with fatal consequences? As the legal battle continued, new layers of the case began to unfold, and with them, new questions that couldn't be ignored. The Ring camera footage that was never supposed to see the light of day, was leaked by 1819 News. The video, captured from across the street from Steven Perkins' home, showed the final moments before the shooting.
The camera does not include a timestamp. The neighbor who provided the video told News 19 the entire encounter from the first police car driving down the street to the shooting was about 12 minutes. It appears that as the tow truck driver hitches Perkins' pickup truck, Perkins walks outside. You can see a light moving in the front yard. And within 7 seconds of Perkins walking outside, after more than 15 rounds are fired, officers are seen running from different directions near Perkins' house. The end of the video shows the tow truck driver driving off with a pickup truck as officers stand near the fatally wounded Perkins.
The timeline of events was no longer a mystery, and the new footage raised more questions than answers. Why were officers acting like this was a high-risk operation? Why didn't they announce themselves? Why was there such secrecy despite no active crime scene? But as if the new revelations weren't enough, another bombshell dropped. Chief Todd Pinion, who had initially attempted to control the narrative, resigned from his position following a damning internal review of the Decatur Police Department.
I recognize there are areas and opportunities for improvement in this area, and I have already begun to implement some changes to ensure better accountability. In the days and weeks ahead, I will continue to look for areas of improvement and changes that can be made. I'm also concerned by the perception created by this report and by certain comments by members of our city administration that my administration has promoted more aggressive policing, a lack of accountability, and directing or allowing our officers to make unnecessary arrests. We acknowledge that we are not perfect, and there are situations where we could have made better decisions. I believe these are isolated incidents and not a reflection of the overall conduct of our officers or this department.
The chief's resignation sent a message to the public and to the family of Steven Perkins. There was more to this case than anyone had imagined. As the story developed, so did the trial. Initially set for June 2025, the trial of Officer Marquette was postponed. The reasons behind the delay were unclear, but for the Perkins family, every additional day without justice only deepened their frustration. The new trial date was set for September 15th, 2025. More months, more waiting. And, with each passing day, more people in Decatur and across the country questioning whether this would ever reach a fair conclusion.
As a result of the facts and evidence presented in this case, the grand jury unanimously returned an indictment against Mac Marquette, charging him with the crime of murder.
After months of investigations into the shooting death of Steve Perkins, a former Decatur police officer is now charged with murder. Morgan County District Attorney Scott Anderson announced Friday morning that Mac Marquette had been arrested for shooting and killing Steve Perkins in his front yard. Law enforcement agencies have denied repeated requests to see body camera video from the night Perkins was killed. Now his family will get to see it, but Anderson says he's keeping it from the public to avoid tainting the jury pool.
For Steven's family, the arrest of his widow, the ongoing delays, the lack of transparency, it was all a reminder that the fight for justice was just beginning. But as they stood in the face of it all, their resolve only grew stronger. They weren't just fighting for a verdict. They were fighting for the truth to be heard. This case is riddled with questions that seemed impossible to answer. One of the first was about the repo records. Was Steven's loan truly behind? For months, Steven's family insisted that they were current on their payments, that the repossession was a mistake. Yet, as the investigation unfolded, new documents began to surface. According to evidence revealed in court, Steven was several months late on his loan. But how reliable were those records? The family stood firm in their belief that the credit union had made a mistake. They questioned the accuracy of the documents, the timing of the repossession, and whether the entire situation had been a series of errors or something more. The truth seemed to shift like sand underfoot, making it difficult for anyone, even the family, to know where to stand. Was Steven being treated unfairly, or was he truly behind on his payments? The conflicting records only added to the uncertainty, creating cracks in the narrative that had begun to form. But the real mystery began with the handling of the body cam footage. For weeks, the Decatur Police Department refused to release the video. They cited an ongoing investigation, but the public wasn't convinced. Why hold on to it? What was in that footage that was so important? Why had the department lied about the initial details of the shooting? And why was the footage being kept from Steven's family, who had every right to see it? The more they tried to get answers, the more the story seemed to slip through their fingers. The secrecy only fueled the mistrust. And the more the public demanded the truth, the more the department appeared to hide. As the case moved forward, these red herrings, the conflicting records, the withheld footage, weren't just frustrating the Perkins family. They were deepening the mystery and leaving everyone who followed the case wondering, what were they really trying to hide? Every twist in the investigation only raised more questions. And as the trial date loomed, the unresolved issues seemed to grow larger, threatening to overshadow everything that had happened before. Could the truth ever be fully exposed, or would this case remain tangled in confusion and half-truths? A man is dead. A family is left to pick up the pieces of a life that was taken too soon. And now, an officer waits for the trial that could change everything. Officer Mac Marquette stands accused of murder, his actions on that fateful night leading to a death that could have been avoided. As the legal proceedings move forward, Decatur, Alabama, faces a reckoning. The question isn't just about one officer's fate, it's about whether the system will hold those in power accountable for their actions. The questions are loud and the answers seem just out of reach. Will they demand accountability for what happened that night on Ryan Drive? The trial is set to begin on September 15, 2025. Will justice be served, or will another chapter in this tragic story be written? One thing is certain, we'll be watching, and so should you. If you've been following Steven Perkins' case and want to know how this story unfolds, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll bring you every update, every twist, and every turn in this fight for justice. Don't miss out. Comment your thoughts below and let us know. What do you think the outcome will be? See you in the next video.